right, everyone, welcome back. We are here for another roundtable and a topic that is very important to me, and I've talked about a lot on this channel. And we have with us Born Oldest and Oscar, and a special guest, our YouTube channel's own Pipe Smoking Heathen. You all have seen him in the live streams quite a bit, making comments as well as asking some great questions. Heathen, it is wonderful to have you with us here tonight. Thank you for joining us. And it's actually cool to hear that this is a topic that you are passionate about as well. And that is actually going to be science and magic. And more specifically, we're going to kind of dial in on terms that are used in both very differently. And most people don't actually know how these terms, well, what the terms are actually mean or how they're used in science. Because I think all four of us have definitely encountered individuals in the occult who they want to claim scientific backing of an individual ideal, a healing technique, or something they're selling. And they do use these science words to make it sound researched and proven, and and when you get to looking at it, really, you just find out it's smoke and mirrors. And that bothers me personally. But we're also not here to attack science, because I think everyone here actually enjoys science quite a bit. Nor are we here to attack magic or the occult, which I know everyone here enjoys those. I mean, look what I do, right?
Kind of counterintuitive to do either one, really.
All we're trying to do is cut through the thicket of these terms that have just been used colloquially so often that we've never stopped to think what they mean in the two separate categories. So that if you run into an individual who might be either using them incorrectly, unknowingly, or just full-on snake oil salesman, you yourself as an individual have the knowledge to better sort through the miasma that is. Okay? All right. And we'll go ahead and start with you all and why you're interested in this topic particularly. Heathen, you're the guest. Do you mind giving us a start there?
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Pipe Smoking Heathen. I am a failed mathematician, and so apparently Oscar succeeded where I failed, because pre-calculus kicked my rear end. However, I will say, when I was involved, so I really went a heavy philosophical route when I was in college, really heavy into English and philosophy and stuff like that nature. But I also got a really good idea for how to think scientifically as well as how to think philosophically, because the two things are not the same. And oftentimes when we're having these conversations, what I run into is the people tend to talk past each other because they're not understanding what they're saying. And if you mix in a healthy dose of predators that are, and I do believe that they are predators, preying on the weak-willed and the people that don't know any better, trying to sell them something, or trying to start a cult in the worst cases, but in the least cases trying to feel super smart on the internet, because nobody ever lies on the internet. And
right,
and so it's something that's become near and dear to my heart, because I'm very I would hesitate to call magic scientific, but there is a scientific method that can be applied to a magical practice, and I like that idea. It was what got me started into the mysteries and the occult to begin with, and it's what keeps me here to this day, because if it did not work, I would not do it.
Same. There's a lot of work that goes into magic that people don't talk about. And in all honesty, if it did not work, I wouldn't be putting the time into it either. That is just the truth on that.
Yeah.
And I like how you said science and philosophy, because a lot of people doesn't actually understand that when we say the term metaphysical or metaphysics, that term itself is literally a division of philosophy. They don't understand that the study of metaphysics is a study of philosophy, not of science. So I actually really like how you put that in there specifically.
In fact, could I add a comment? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was
It's
actually
just
going
a-
to get you next. So good, perfect.
Oh, cool.
Piggyback right on in there if you will.
Next.
Because the word metaphysics is also a problem. I have an issue with that word because metaphysics to me is a discussion of physics, like the meta of physics, right? So like one example I like is like Richard Feynman talking about conservation of energy. And he was just talking about it from like a calculational perspective. And he would say, well, what is energy? I don't know. That's metaphysics. Because that is a discussion of what like the thing we're talking about, which is a different viewpoint than like what physics likes to prefer. So, and so I guess that's a good way to transition to my background. So I have a bachelor's in mathematics and a bachelor's in physics. And I had this whole idea where I wanted to become a theoretical physicist, like get a PhD and like kind of just butt heads with other people who were thinking about like quantum gravity. But I think I just had like one moment where I was learning this super complicated like thing, quantum field theory. And I just looked at the board and I was just like, I'm done. I don't know what's going on anymore. I haven't followed like the last 10 minutes. I don't know if this is worth my time. And it was just like this whole like thing. But I then remembered that I had like weird experiences as a kid, like ghostly encounters and stuff like that. And I was just like, well, what's up with that? And I just couldn't let it go. Or my friends, you know, I have a friend who's getting a PhD in quantum gravity, and I talk to him and he gets super uncomfortable, but I just can't let it go. And so I think like taking both of those things, like what is that, and applying like the scientific inquiry is kind of what led me to Magick.
Okay. I'll be honest, you guys, it's kind of funny because I love science. I've enjoyed it my whole life. Many of you even know I came to Magick to prove it didn't work, and kind of egg in my face there because now it proved itself against me. But when it comes to math and all this other stuff, I mean, you guys definitely make me feel like the fish out of water. I'm just the crazy redneck mage here.
I was gonna
But that's
ask.
okay.
Yeah.
That is okay. Because I think this is actually going to work really well. I think this is going to be a fun one. Born. Your
Yeah.
turn.
Well, I don't have much in terms of my background when it comes to science or physics other than just
No,
hobby.
I ain't got that either.
Yeah, just more hobby stuff, you know, interest in this or, you know, doing some basic math on something you'd think in sci-fi, but that's nothing, no college degree or any of that. My whole interest in trying to compare the two is more just figuring out exactly what works and what doesn't on, and it's the same thing as basically everyone here in the call, you know, just trying to figure out what parts do work, what don't, and applying a method of testing it to be sure, rather than just going off of what one person says or another.
Okay.
But
well, how about we start before we just start talking over people's heads, as a few of us have occasionally done in chats before. Let's try to go through and define those terms we were talking about a little bit and discuss those. Not just give the definition, but let's actually discuss them and our opinions on them from science and philosophy standings. And I think the best place to start is, since we define metaphysics, we should point out specifically what we mean when we say science. And Oscar, correct me if I'm wrong, if the definition has changed or shifted in somewhat, because you're more up to date than I am. Heathen probably is too. But science, as I remember, is roughly defined as the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
It's a pretty good one, yeah.
Yeah. And you'll notice that's physical world, that's observation, that's experiment. So we're dealing with tangibles.
Yeah.
Would everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the next one, and this one I think is very important, because this is the one buzzword that I see more than any other currently in the metaphysical community? Quantum.
God.
I have a love-hate relationship with this word because I love to read string theory and try to wrap my head around some of the quantum physics, which I am definitely not qualified to talk well about.
You're not
But
alone.
when it comes to quantum magic or quantum mysticism or quantum occults, this one does grate me because they begin to talk about dimensions and planes and other realities where the word quantum, fun for me, it literally means the smallest possible discrete unit of any physical property. There's that word again, people, physical.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene in I think it's Guardians of the Galaxy where they're like in an asteroid field, but the asteroids keep like disappearing and reappearing. They call it like a quantum asteroid field or something like that. It drove me up a wall. It like I couldn't like get into the rest of the movie because I was just like, this is so wrong. Like you could have literally used any other word and I wouldn't have cared, but you slapped on quantum and now I'm upset. So yeah, it's a
I shall never recover.
It's weird because you have this and you see something like that and you're like, that's not right. Like the
Yeah.
number of people I know in the Navy, they'll see ships or submarines in a movie and they're like, no, it's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you're right. There's a lot of things like Guardians of the Galaxy where they use that word, and it's like that ain't how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one I've brought up in a live stream, and this one we're definitely going to spend some time on because those first three pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
This one deserves some discussion. We're gonna grate on people here. We're going to talk about the actual definition of the word energy.
It's whatever I feel like it is, man.
Oh no. No, energy, the definition, the capacity to do work. What energy would not be? Energy wouldn't be an object, a substance, an essence, a life force, or a magical realm. When we use this word metaphysically, we are definitely pulling hard on that colloquial ribbon.
Yeah.
Because the way science utilizes it and the way it's utilized in magic, they're two completely, utterly separate things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair,
go ahead.
sorry, you can. Oh, okay, thank you. I remember the first time a teacher read that definition to me, and it pissed me off. So I was just like, that doesn't say anything. And he's just like, what do you want me to do about that? And I was just like, describe it, give it,
What do you
like,
want?
make it make sense. And he's like, that's what it is though. And I think like people want a graspable concept. So so like when you hear energy, it sucks that it's only a number. It's just a calculation. And that's all it
It's
is.
a calculation
And that's all
of
it
its
ever be.
ability to do work, much like compressing a sperm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all it is. And people hate that because it's so abstract and it's like, what? But you know.
Yeah.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am the philosopher. So, Oscar, are numbers
Yes.
real or not?
Depends on who you ask.
What do you think? Are numbers real or not? Because that has a bearing on what you just said. Because you said, "Oh, it's just a measurement." Is it a real thing or is it not?
God, I didn't know we were going to go on this. Like, I didn't know you were
You
going
wanted to join the
this up,
discussion.
But do you mean like in a like idealistic sense?
No, I mean physically. Are numbers real?
No, then no.
Okay.
But I think that, like, what is it? I think it was either Polly or I forget there's this essay on the unreasonable effectiveness of math, where that topic is discussed by a physicist. It's like, is the universe math or is it just like, because is math created or discovered? And I personally felt, because I had a math degree, that math was created and we just got really lucky.
May
And
I?
that's
may I
kind of
may I throw a possible answer? And I'm not saying this is correct. This is we're
Yeah.
getting just by even at this early in the conversation, we're kind of getting to the limits of
Yeah.
of my ability to comprehend certain things.
Okay. No problem.
But I have toyed with the idea, and I'm not saying this is correct, but I've toyed with the idea
Mhm.
that math is the shadow of physics. Being that,
Yeah. So
yeah,
okay.
again,
So
again, dude, like you gotta explain it, like you gotta explain it with sock puppets and crayons for me. But that's the
yeah.
best way I can, the best way
Guys,
that
I literally hustled my way through Algebra 1, so I'm
But the way and I had brought this up to a professor one time, and he didn't tell me I was wrong, so it's at least worth conversing about, I think. But the idea that math is the shadow of physics, the same way that the shadow of a ball isn't the thing, but it does show the shape and the texture of the ball if exposed to direct sunlight, kind of that idea.
This conversation is like tricky because it depends on who you ask, right? Like if I had this conversation with my physics professors, because I've had something similar about this.
Mhm.
Like I had a physics professor who I respected so much because his research was so interesting and counter to how people mathematically formulate quantum mechanics. But he had did it 40 years too late, so it didn't matter. But he kept doing it anyway. And it was like, if he had just been born with this idea sooner, physics would have been completely different.
Mhm.
And I just remember him saying specifically, like, and I would always push questions, like things like that, like what he did like, what he didn't like. And he was just like, in order to disagree, you have to understand. And so he would talk about like physical situations where he didn't agree with the formulation from a quantum mechanics perspective. And
Mhm.
and on an offhand comment, he'd be like, this is my formulation, by the way, if you're curious. And so there were sometimes I just ask him, and like for example, he would talk about I'm trying not to make it too like mechanical, but he would talk about like charge traveling across the surfaces, right? Electrons and stuff, right? And he's like,
Mhm.
what are electrons? And he's like, electrons could be little men carrying charge on the surface of the ball, or it could be like little elves flying, and then that's how we perceive charge. Either way, the math stays the same.
Mhm.
And that's the fundamental difference between like how a physicist is going to approach physics and then how a mathematician or a philosopher or anybody else is going to approach physics. Because those are unnecessary details that from a perspective of a physicist, it doesn't matter what it is because the math will be the same. Now,
Well, the argument can be made that the same thing holds true for a magician as well. Who cares why it works as long as it works?
Yes.
Right. And
I think
that is the one area
yeah.
where they do heavily overlap, is the back and forth discussion of one philosophy on the matter versus another, and one person poses this as fact, another poses this as fact, when we really have no evidence
Right.
to prove
Yeah.
either way.
I mean, that's the backbone of this channel is magic backed by results, not just, hey, I said this thing, trust me.
My
Yeah.
sources, trust me, bro.
So
But
I think
that does bring up a good point though, because
Yeah.
the idea here is who are the people that are saying, oh, it's quantum this, it's energy that, it's the machine elves, such and the other, it's
Yeah.
people that are trying to convince skeptics and trying to build some
Yeah.
kind of a following. Because the thing is, like, people like Drake and some of the other ones, like we're very, I mean, I know I am too when I talk to people. I'm very open about when I do get into the conversation, because it's not super common in the day-to-day life you get into a conversation about this, but when I do, I'm very open about, I do it as scientifically as I know I'm able to, and I write it down, and if it works, I do it again. If it works twice, well, that's a pattern. But the people that do use quantum such and such, energy thus and thus, they usually fall into one of two categories. One is they're trying to convert people, like it's some kind of a religion, or two, they're trying to prove their nonsense, and they're trying to make it sound truthy.
Yeah.
In some cases, some terms I could see evolving just kind of on their own. Like, for example, energy itself. In its normal definition that most people use, not in an academic setting, but just average every
even
day.
outside metaphysics,
Yeah.
even outside the study of magic, we still talk about how a room has good energy.
I'm low energy.
Yeah. There is a lot of that. And so I think when someone talks about even just taking the definition capacity to do work, one could easily take, oh, well, I put this amount of effort or will or whatever you want to call it into a working or an evocation or any of this. And it's just the term they use to best describe what they're doing. Even if it's not exact, it's close enough that it makes sense when you try to explain it to someone.
Mhm.
And so I would agree that there are those two types of people you listed, but some of them have kind of just happened over time. And then somewhere along the line, it got lost in translation of, oh, wait, they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
And so
No,
some
Born
people
brings up a
don't
good point. I mean,
pick up on the difference.
I agree with you because you do see a lot of that, totally. But I have to also agree with Born because even amongst the admin team in the Gilded server, like we've discussed the term energy a lot, and we've discussed replacement terms, which currently we're floating an attempt to use a new term, which we'll talk about. But I've noticed in our conversations, like we keep wanting to just jump back to saying energy, like it's just easier to say. Why? It's literally about the same length. It's not easier. It's just literally you're just so used to using it.
I have to get like when entities talk to me, I have to tell them like they're like we're from an ether body, and then, just to like get myself in the habit of like please we have to be correct here.
Well, some of that has to do with the Western culture they grew up into. If you read the old grimoires, a lot of them do say energy over and over again. If you read some of the Eastern grimoires, if any of you guys are familiar with Dr. Skinner, whom
Yes,
I have a love-hate relationship with. I love his books,
same.
but I really just I'm like, dude, just say it in plain English. But
Yes.
I can't. I have nothing ill to say about him as an academic. He is amazing, and his books are pure gold. But he definitely writes like an academic. But I will say, like some of the stuff that he writes, because he actually lives in, I think he lives in either Sri Lanka or somewhere in the East.
It's China,
And they
I
don't
think.
use, they don't use the word energy out there. They use something else. Like I know they'll use chi or something else,
Yeah,
but that gets thrown around over there the way energy does in Western culture.
yeah.
Yep,
So some of this is a cultural thing too. I'm familiar
Yeah.
with. Right?
it is.
That's so funny. That's so funny that you mentioned Steven Skinner because he was like this weird like bridge for me where
Mhm.
like I was coming out of academia and this guy was just like, no, this is like science. And I was like, tell me more. And then he would like go through this whole procedure. And then like I don't agree with everything he says or his attitude towards entities is kind of disrespectful in my opinion. But but it was a good like stepping stone. I think like he does have a valuable place, I think, in like the serious treatment of magic as an actual field of study.
Absolutely. Like I said, my only real gripe with him is that like anytime you buy one of his books, you have to rewrite his book in your words to make it usable. At least I do.
I've read a lot of books like that. So
Well,
here's a ponderance for us. For the working Dragon Mystic community specifically. And out there, if you're watching this, come along with us for this journey. If we as magicians wanted to choose a new word to better describe what we're referring to when we colloquially use the term energy, what would you as individuals pick? Because we already know what I picked, because that's what we're floating around the admin team. And if you think that's a good word, you can use it. But Heathen, let's start with you, because you have no idea what we're doing up in the admin room. So we're just going to throw you under the bus on this one.
Okay.
Born, you're next. We get you at the back tires.
So just so I understand the question, it's a word that we would use to replace energy as used in the occult.
Right.
Yes.
Like if
Yeah.
you're making your own terminology or your own lexicon for it.
Well, so very, very quick background about me. So I am actually I do have heathen leanings. I started this path by getting into paganism, heathenry. And the more I dug, the deeper I would actually use the word woad for it. If I had like I'm king of the world, I would use woad because it carries a lot of the very similar ideas that energy colloquially has, but it doesn't have the stigma with it, and nobody uses the word
No,
exclusively.
outside heathen communities, I never hear it. You are correct.
Right. I think woad, if you were to call it something like that, because woad does being the energy of life, the energy of that and fuels everything. So I think that would not be a terrible one to throw into the hat if you were to guess.
That is a good one in the hat. That is good. I like that one. Okay. born.
Say word.
Gotta be
Say word.
careful. I almost slipped into the joking nickname I use sometimes privately, where we put a Y on it.
Oh, I see what you're going. Well,
Gotta be careful.
I know. Oh, I should have. Now, see, I know that there is some. I can't think of which one it is right now. There's some religion that uses this word somewhere in it too. I can't remember which one or what for, but one I've always run into time and again that always just meant this one thing. And the definition I find of it is always the same, just meaning supernatural power, or in some cases, supernatural energy is what it's sometimes referred to as, just mana or mana. And you see it a bunch of places, and it's a popular enough word throughout some fantasy, some not, that it's, you say mana and most people will know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And they don't think of physical energy, they think of a magical sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll have to look up which religion it was associated with. I forget which one it is off the top of my head.
It shows up in Christianity, but not necessarily as energy, but manna from heaven is what they were fed on from the desert. Which that goes down a weird research rabbit hole in and of itself.
Yes, it does.
It even goes down into insects and insects poop.
Oh,
Yeah,
maybe that wouldn't be the best.
I followed that road really far, but I do see what you're saying. I think mana is a really interesting term. It is, and like, I'm not gonna lie, I actually bounced that one across my desk a time or two. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if the same reason I shied away from it is why it hasn't caught on. And that's because I, as old as I am, cannot hear that without thinking of a video game.
Same.
And that is fair. That is
And I'm
fair.
wondering if that's why a lot of magicians are shying away from it.
Yeah.
So,
I can see it. I can see it.
Oscar,
I ran through a couple of ones. I wanted to comment on Woad. I think my only gripe, and this is a very recent one because I've been working with Odin, is that his one of his names is Wodanaz.
Mhm.
And it feels too much like I'm like hyping him up to me, is why I personally wouldn't use Woad. Like, not like, which is like, it's okay if like you use it, but just like it's a me thing purely. But one word that I remember, I think it was like, I don't know how you say it, but like Ikor or Ikor, like it's like the Greek it's like the Greek word for the blood of the gods.
yeah,
I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I think the one that like Drake and I have been using in conversation is just Ether.
Yep.
So I don't know. I
Oscar's-
kind of like Ether, but I'm also kind of partial to Iker, but also it's hard to pronounce.
yeah.
Is
So we
that
just need the words.
is that how it's pronounced? Is Iker?
You
I
just-
don't know.
I'd be honest, I don't know. My Greek sucks. Okay.
My wife has
Her
been calling
Greek is
it
probably
Iker for this
better.
entire time.
But like every time I see it, I pronounce it Icor and I think of bug slime.
Yeah, like
little bit,
Icor,
yeah.
some people say Iker,
So
but it's generally just.
and I don't think they're the same word, but that's just the first thing that pops in my mind. Maybe they are the
Yeah.
same word. I don't
they're
know.
the
They are?
same.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
do we use that word for bug slime? Does anybody know this?
Because it's usually just watery discharge from a creature.
Gross, but okay.
That explains Zeus. That explains Zeus.
Yeah.
Ew, but yes.
We might
Well,
have to
that
edit that one
it
out.
usually refers to like blood or other fluids. Sure.
Yes.
So essence of the god, blood of the gods. I could see that. Okay. But yeah, for me, I
Yeah.
settled into, try ether because even science has used this word time and time again. The most relevant use of it that I am aware is they thought that there had to be a medium of some kind for light to travel through. And that theory has pretty much fallen through over and over. And this unknown medium is what they would refer to as ether. And to me, that kind of just rang with when we talk about this unknown metaphysical something that's out there. That's whether it's just consciously shaping, whether it's unconsciously shaping, whether it's an unknown form of math, we don't know. God help me if it's unknown, because I don't do well with what we already got. But it just seemed to fit.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's the right word. I'm not saying it's the perfect word, but right now it seems to fit well. And for me, it also gives a good separation between scientific energy. That was my thinking on it. Okay. And this is already going way deeper and farther than I thought we was going to go with some of these. All right.
There's also,
Go ahead.
okay, thank you. There's also, oh boy, this has the possibility to ruffle some feathers, so we're going to tread very carefully.
Okay.
There is also the idea that we need to, poor, don't look at me like that.
Oh, he gets some weird looks. You should don't get
There's also the
don't get in a
idea-
private call with him. He gets all close to the camera. It gets creepy.
He does.
So while I do have a deep respect and appreciation for the scientific method and the idea that it should be used and we should use it, and we're human beings, and this is at the end of the day, this is what human beings do. We were created, in my mind, to figure things out and to create, and this is part of that process. However, science, in my humble opinion, should never be replaced by scientism, because science, as far as I'm aware, is a method of finding the truth. Scientism is a cage that dumb people lock smart people into to keep them from doing things.
Agreed.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so
yeah.
the finishing of the thought would be, while I do like the idea of coming up with our own terminology and words, like I'm not necessarily in love with the idea of tiptoeing around the science books because we don't want to make them mad. Like I think picking a word because it makes sense and it fits what we're trying to describe more than, you know, don't offend smart science peoples in laboratories might be a better way to move into it, which it sounds like, I mean, that's the conversation we're already having, but it's something that I kind of wanted to get out into the open.
I'll be honest, I'm not too worried about offending scientists or occultists for that matter. Like I said, it's the terminology and a thought process behind the words and possible options. For most people, I honestly fully expect them to continue using the word energy. I really do.
And they probably will.
And that makes absolute sense. That's, if I am a betting man, I'd bet on the word energy. Seriously. It's just, if we understand these terms and how they're used on both sides of the fence, then that gives us an understanding of the conversation we're in based on what side of the fence is the conversation on. Or if you're someone who studies metaphysics and you're talking to someone who only understands science, you now know this word has a completely different meaning to this individual.
So. Yeah, I think to add to Heathen's point and his defense, because I totally agree, is that scientism makes assumptions and the scientific method is open-ended.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's like the clear distinction.
Yeah. You are absolutely correct. You have to be willing to be wrong and be willing to change what you think you know.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things I have loved about science, because scientists once thought the earth was flat. And then observation, testing proved otherwise. So you are correct on that. Absolutely.
Yeah. But that being said, too, there are things out there in the world that can be that there's only a few, and really only one comes to mind. I'm sure there are other people that can be pretty much proven scientifically, because especially when I'm having conversations, which I don't do it anymore because it's a waste of energy, I find. But usually when I'm speaking with somebody and they're hardcore skeptics, back in my early days, I used to, and I would have conversations with people that are like, "Oh, we'll prove it," and I say, "Okay." The placebo effect. They're like, "Oh yeah, well, we know that." I'm like, "Yeah, other than this obvious miracle that everybody knows about, yeah, no, it's totally not real." But placebo effect works. It works to some extent. That's why they have double-blind studies on it. And it doesn't matter how well it works. The fact that it works at all is some kind of a testament to the ability of the human mind and the subconscious mind to heal the body of physical ailments. That is, in my mind, magical, if nothing else. But I'm a weird one. I think that everything is magic to some degree or another. Turning on the lights, just because I can explain it doesn't make it less magical that electricity goes through the filaments. You know?
No, yeah.
Yeah, and that is true to because if there is, let's say, some if we were to go really deep down the rabbit hole, and let's assume for a moment that this, physical reality we're in wasn't some accident by any means, then yeah, by that definition, it is essentially the binary code of how this world would work, deep past what we can currently measure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I think that instead of scientism, and we can go into that too, and maybe perhaps a whole other thing, but I feel like we're gonna just end up bashing somebody, so I don't want to do that too much.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's fair.
Because
That's fair.
I will. If given the opportunity, I will.
Oscar's like, I'll beat him up.
I'm here for it. Let's go.
But I think that like what I'm trying to do is just take the procedure from the scientific inquiry and then be like, hey, I noticed there's some phenomena that I don't think quite necessarily fits a physical paradigm, and let's see how much data we can get to like hopefully get some hypothesis. Because even in physics, right, it's explanatory to the extent that we can explain it. And I know that sounds like weird, but that's kind of what it is. It is,
yeah.
Your conclusion is as good as the measurement that you're making.
Right, you're right.
Nothing else.
And actually, I would like to go through the scientific method on here if we got time. I really would. And how
from artscolumbia.org.
are you
The scientific method.
Silence machine.
is that coming through?
It did a little bit.
It was a little bit.
There's magic afoot.
The spirits are talking through the middle.
The machine spirits have spoken.
Oh, technology hates me. Okay. I might leave that in just because screw it.
That was a little funny. Yeah.
Drake just looks at his over at his Alexa and holds
With
up
these
a coffee
next two
cup.
terms, I think we need to cover two terms before we get into the scientific method and how it needs to be tweaked if you're going to use it in magic, because that's what I do. I mean, my opening talks about the science of magic. But we got to be careful not to eat up an hour on these next two because they're going to get a little mathy.
Ooh,
and Oscar, you love math, I know.
Remember, stock
So-
focus.
everybody hold my hand.
Yeah, hold him down. Hold him down. The next two terms that we use in metaphysics a lot and also used in science and do not use them remotely in the ballpark. Positive and negative. We talk about this object has positive energy. Ooh, I like this as my morning cup of coffee. It makes me so positive. Oscar, why am I full of shit?
That's a feeling and not
Write your 5-page essay on why am I full of shit?
you're having a psychological feeling, not a observable. I guess if we scanned your brain, maybe there'd be like neurotransmitters, but like that's kind of the extent of like from a scientific perspective, like when people get upset, like when someone scratches their eyes over the word chakra, it's like that kind of thing. Like, is that the same use?
For the simple folk like me, what Oscar's saying is positive and negative is a mathematical value north of zero or south of zero. Either you're below zero, which means you're negative mathematically, or you're above zero. That's a positive number. That is the only meaning they have. That is not even in the ballpark of how we use them in magic or metaphysics.
Got a rant about that.
Yeah. So far, no, go ahead.
So there's nothing about positive or negative that means good or bad.
Yeah.
But that's exactly how we use them. Again, with that big fancy word, colloquially. I think I'm mispronouncing. If I am, somebody correct me.
Colloquially. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, positive and negative is just like, again, like it's more moralistic thinking. Like it's like a good or bad type of thing. I think
Yeah,
they use that a lot.
they're usually regarding of whether this feels like it would be somehow beneficial to me or
Yeah.
harmful.
Yeah.
And even then, their definition of harmful varies depending on how you're interpreting it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because
So
I
I
mean,
come-
I know that if you looked at me, if I were born, and let's say I came up to you and said, "Hey, born, I know you're hurting, I know it's bad, but I'm going to sit here, I'm going to inject this snake venom in you. It's going to be okay."
Okay. No.
On one hand, it's like you're going to do what? No, you're going to hurt him. But on the other hand, you literally make anti-venom out of venom.
Yeah.
So if the reason you're hurting is because you got bit by the snake,
Mhm.
I'm not
or, if
harming.
or if your friend just injected you with snake venom and he's like, oh, wait, wrong vial. Hold on.
Yeah, wrong guy. Might question that friendship after though.
Be a good idea.
Yeah, so those are big ones. Those are huge ones there. And I would encourage people to look into those differently. Another one, vibration. This is literally periodic motion of particles
Yeah.
of an elastic body.
Mhm.
Yep.
So if it doesn't actually move, it doesn't vibrate, people.
Yep.
And this one, it didn't bother me until like a refresher course on terms. Because this is one of the ones that just like, I don't know if I slept through that class in science or what.
Mhm.
Could have. But frequency. This one gets thrown a lot, especially in the crystal community. But we also hear it when we talk about entities and how entities vibrate at different frequencies based on, are they physical or are they not physical?
Yeah, and it's the same thing when applied to the planes. Like that whole realm is on a different
Right.
frequency from ours.
Now, and again, correct me, Oscar, because like I'm pulling from old brain. Frequency is essentially the number of cycles per unit of time that something moves, or it's like a wave, like a sound wave,
Yeah.
right?
Whenever it's measured, it's taken in a form of wave, and so the frequency just measures the amount within a certain given span that wave reaches its apex in a given frame.
Right.
That's
And
it.
again, we don't have good frequencies, we don't have bad frequencies, we just have a measurement of time.
Good vibrations. So I was thinking about that
It's-
song.
You could almost think it's similar to how you would measure heartbeat, almost like it's just how many times the heart beats in a moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The same way, just when I have, if I were to have a really long piece of string or something, and I were to somehow count how it vibrates and just count how many times it reaches to here in a moment, that would be the frequency at which it's vibrating at.
Yeah. Before we get into the scientific method, anything y'all want to add? Anything we didn't cover that you think needs covered?
Ask either.
Ethan?
You know, some
He's like, pick me.
Somebody
teacher, hi.
Somebody put this box down here. It's got the word soap written on it. It's great. I'm just gonna step on this real quick. All right.
It doesn't say Paper Street
Buckle
Soap
up,
Company,
buckaroos.
does it?
All right, now.
If it does, you
So-
might want to change rooms.
Right. So I come from a very ceremonial magic point of view, because that's kind of really a lot of my stuff is very ceremonial in nature, because that was kind of what I started with, and for the actual praxis of the craft. And when the two things that you're talking about, the polarity and also the vibration, so both of that is used pretty heavily in ceremonial magic. However, it means nothing as to what it means, right, to what is commonly used by crystal people. Which
Right.
can we call them that? Is that going to offend the internet if I call them crystal people?
It may, but I've said it so many times on live stream. It's
I mean,
to be
stallions.
expected.
if someone's gonna get offended, just mentioning them in general will do it, regardless of how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea of polarity is so the idea of polarity when it comes into the way that I understand the world, and I will say this in the beginning, I always claim the right to change my mind if I'm presented with different information or I learn something new. So what I'm
Valid,
about to say
valid.
right
I've said the
now
same on the
is
channel.
as things as I understand it at this moment.
Right now.
So as I understand things at this moment, the worldview that I currently have is that everything has a negative and a positive polarity. That does not mean good and bad. That means negative and positive. Whereas negative is the pillar of oh god,
No,
Boaz and
thanks for the
Yaakov.
compliment.
Boaz and Yaakov. The black one is Boaz, right?
think
Anyway.
so yeah,
Yeah, I
that
think
Yeah,
sounds,
it doesn't.
sounds
Yeah,
right.
it's not a big deal. It's only the thing that I focus on. Anyway, but the idea
It's
is
been a while since I've looked at the middle pillar ritual, so I can't remember.
yeah. So it's dude, I do the middle pillar ritual every day, and it just flew away. But
Brain farts, they happen to us all.
but the
Yeah.
idea there is that everything has a to some degree or another is somewhere on that line of polarity. And almost everything in the world can be put on that line somewhere. It's the polarity of masculine and feminine, severity and mercy, things like that. But
It's true.
there's no like, but that thing as a philosophical idea of how the world works exists. It almost exists outside of the scientific method. Like I can say like, oh, this is positive or negative, speaking in that term, speaking as it is on a polarity scale, without it being scientific. Like, no, I don't know how many electrons are in it. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is where is that on this scale.
And that's exactly what we're talking about here, because you are right. Within ceremonial magic, because of the middle pillar and because of how they use that term frequency, and they give it a definition within their ceremonial workings and orders, and everyone in that lodge, group, or order, they know this ceremonial definition of this word. In a conversation, there's no confusion with them. And to some extent, I've actually heard the argument made, this is why initiation into orders is required to avoid confusion of the outside world.
So
I agree with that entirely. We all know how I'm about gatekeeping.
So here's my God, this is a hard one because so here's the thing, like I get that. And to a certain degree, I kind of agree with it because the idea of keeping the profane out of a ceremonial space because they just don't have the ability to understand. Like some people do, some people don't. It's not, and I know that sounds so arrogant, and I don't mean it to.
It takes the training and keeps it in a closed environment, so that way you know what you're teaching is.
Everybody knows the secret handshake
from what you know.
Yeah, everybody knows the secret handshake. The problem with that is that's how stagnation happens.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot of where the problem is with it.
It's a double-edged sword though, because now you have people on TikTok telling you that, if you put this quartz into your tennis ball, you'll win every match.
That's not the worst place they're telling people to put things.
Yeah,
That's as much as I can say right there without getting flagged.
Right. Come on, man. You said you wouldn't bring that up on.
I'll be right back. I'll be right back, folks.
Heathen, I think a good word to replace, I think like polarity, is gradient, because it's a gradation between the two concepts that we're talking about. And I like to use that word way better because people think polarity and then they instantly go somewhere. But gradient is, I feel like, very specific.
I can see that. Can see that.
My only concern with something like that is if we. It almost seems like there's a concern to me that so the people that really are kind of the culprits of this, that give the negative connotations to these phrases and stuff. If let's say we're made the head magi of the circle tomorrow, and everybody listens to us and says, "What do you say we should do?" The problem is that if everybody starts using our terminology, it's going to be used by the people that are doing what they're doing with energy and all this stuff now. So it's a never ending race.
And you're right. That's a valid point. That's one of the reasons I actually stated to help the individual sort through it on their own. Because instead of just saying, hey, we're going to use these terms and it's going to fix it, because it won't. Because a shyster is going to shyst. That's what they're going to do. We change our terms to clear the air. They're going to find a way to use those terms to fog
Yeah.
it back up.
I don't
Mhm.
think we should even be remotely concerned with that, because I think like what I would like to do, and I think Dirk agrees, is like as long as we make a standard, it doesn't matter what everybody else does. It's like the same thing with physics, right? Like that's why it's not that I have a fear or concern with like how scientists are going to view what I'm saying. It's more that like I have a degree in physics. I think physics is pretty cool, and I use it as just a reference point. And that's all it is going to be, you know. And so I try to use terminology just for humans, really, like, because obviously with an entity it doesn't matter. You just say I'm defining it this like this, blah blah blah, and they'll be like, okay, cool. But it's with humans, and that's I feel like the main important thing here to discuss is that like we have to do our best to like, you give a guide, right? You're like, go through this and you'll understand. But if they're like, what if I don't want to? That's not, I don't care. I gave you this. You're deciding to go left. That's not my problem. You know, so that's kind of like the attitude I have.
I see where you're coming from, and you're right. And it's a hard one for me, because like I have to deal with so many probabilities in teaching and putting information out there. And somebody's like, well, what are you going to do if someone misinterprets and does this? It's like, I put the
What can you
information
do?
out there. I explained it. I was like, if I tell them to climb a ladder and they decide to jump off the building, I can't be responsible for their independent decisions.
Mhm.
But it is one of those things, because I have this weird thing where I actually do genuinely hope everyone out there finds a path that betters them, whatever that may mean for them.
Mhm.
And I always hate to see when people are struggling. It's hard, but I also you have to realize you can't fix it. You can't really fix everyone.
You can't save them.
No.
No. What's that phrase? Heaven helps those who help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean that both are valid concepts, and somewhere in between the two is where you got to get that balance.
100%.
And I think that's one reason I have really gravitated toward the dragons so heavily, because there's so many contradictions in my personality and my mindset, because I'm very much a hermit. I don't really like people, even though I'm very charismatic. I'm very sociable. I excel at social events. I'm very friendly, but leave it to me and I'm just going to hold up somewhere by myself. So my personality it's always swinging on two ends. So striking that balance has been a very good thing for me. And I'm really seeing that in all aspects of life. So
I actually had a question for Oscar.
Yeah.
Trying to buy time until Born gets. Oh, Born's back. Never
Yeah.
mind.
Sorry about that. Someone was knocking on my door.
So are you seeing, and you may not know, and it's fair if you don't, but I'm just curious, are you seeing more of maybe acceptance isn't the right word, but are you seeing more curiosity for occult subjects within the scientific community? Because you're more connected to it than I am. You got your finger on the pulse.
Yes and no. I feel like
Okay.
the extremes are getting more extreme. I feel
Yeah.
It just feels like you drop a person in the middle and they go woof and they go off one way and the other people go that way, and then and I'm here like, hey, wait, like where are you going? And it's already too late, you know. So like people are gonna believe what they're gonna believe, right? Because like one of the topics I wanted to discuss on this channel was like the genuine and like, I want to be careful with the word skeptical view of like aliens, like this phenomenon that we're talking about in a like magical lens. Like you take aliens and you take dragons and you mash them together, and what does that look like? And it's kind of like one of the roundtables I wanted to talk.
It's a
Well-
weird day on DeviantArts, what that looks like.
I think we have that one on the list to do in the future, if I
Yeah.
remember right.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is because it's relevant to what you just asked. Like, are
Mhm.
there people who want to chase it, and there are people who are like, no, it's not worth my time. And I think a lot of the times the reason why academics don't do that is because academics are also people. They don't have all the experiences we all have. They're also pressed for time and money. They make terrible pay, and they have to deal with so many politics. That like now you want to add fairies to this thing? Should I add the Loch Ness Monster to my daily list of concerns? Get out of here. Like that's like the attitude.
Yeah, it's
It's
like
fair.
at that well, I may as well just be laughed out of my community. Is
Exactly.
what a
So
lot
it's-
of the proper academics will probably end up being like.
yeah. Yeah, and I think there is one academic I can think of. I think his name is Chris Nolan. He's a geneticist who's had
Mhm.
interactions that he believes are of a separate intelligence. Or I'm thinking somebody else, but his last name is Nolan or something like that. I have to look it up. And so he takes a like this kind of interesting like dance where he doesn't care if you think about the existence of these entities. He purely goes, my end conclusion is that entities are real. Here are some brain scans. And then he begins to like walk you through, hey, isn't this weird that after these experiences, these brains look like that? Isn't that weird,
Mhm.
guys? And then they
Mhm.
slowly begin to like, that to me makes more sense, right? And that's how you win people over, is you go, isn't this weird? And then you have, oh, okay, that is weird, right? Because there's no point in changing their mind. They're gonna go one way or the other, but you know,
People that have shown interest in this thing that we do, is that has always been my method of trying to introduce them to things, because
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer that there are people that were meant to do this work and there are people that were meant to do other works. And
Yeah.
if this is something that's actually meant for them to do, wild horses can't drag them away from it. And I'm a perfect example of that. If you want to put somebody in a position where I should not be here right now, I'm that guy. And I'm not going to get on that tangent. We can do that one day, maybe down the road. But
Yeah.
literally everything that would be stacked against me from doing this was stacked against me, and I still ended up here.
yeah.
So what I will do if somebody brings up an
Okay.
interest in it to see if it's like legitimate, or if they're just trying to take a peep at the freak,
Mhm.
is I'll bring up a couple little things like that, and I'll say, man, that's weird, isn't it? And then I'll just
Yeah.
let them go. And if they continue the
Exactly.
conversation later, I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, you're actually
Yeah.
interested in this. Welcome.
Yeah.
Come in. Let me make some tea.
Funnily enough, that's just the Socratic method.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an extension of the Socratic method. We're just
Mhm.
asking crazier, more specific and bizarre questions.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's I mean, I even also have complaints with like podcasts. Like I always talk about this with Drake. Like there's podcasts about cryptids, Satanists, flat Earth,
Mhm.
blah blah blah. Pick the thing, and if someone somewhere is going to say, "I did research," whatever the hell that means, and I came up with these conclusions, and you're like,
And that is
"Congratulations."
something to focus on too.
Yeah, and that's actually it's a good point for him. It would be a good separate topic of conversation, like an own roundtable. But again, I could bash people.
I agree.
To be careful.
Oh, trust me, we're on the same field there.
Mm-hmm.
We
Could
got a
not-
room full of people who knows that they have a tendency, and we're all trying to be nice.
Uh-huh. I'm trying to be nice.
Look, we're trying to behave
man.
here. We're
We're making it
really,
hard.
really trying. Hopefully we're not failing. Oh Lord. Okay. So speaking of research, let's look at that scientific method. Okay. Because we're talking about a process in which we can put things on and look at them and examine them. And for those who took part in the live workshop where I talked about journals, I actually covered how I do this somewhat myself.
That you did.
I say we go through this step by step, and we would talk about how we as an individual would do it. Does that sound good?
I think so.
All right. Well, the first thing in the scientific method is the formulation of a question. And the question can refer to an explanation of a specific observation. And why is the sky blue? Why do ships sink into the sea? Why is it every time I chant this and light a candle, this thing happens? that one, we don't really need to change this because you need a question that you're going to be
Mhm.
applying the method to,
Mhm,
Yeah.
in my mind.
mhm.
Yeah, you really can't have another step one other than that.
Yeah. Hypothesis is a conjecture based on knowledge you obtained while formulating your question. What brought you to this question? And now that you have your question, what do you think is going to happen?
Mhm.
Pretty simple. And in the case of Magick, for me, if I'm applying a process, whether it be a ritual, a spell, a meditation, and I happen to notice a pattern, and that's my question, is it this process that's creating this pattern? Then my hypothesis for me would be that if I continue to do this in a focused way, then it's going to generate this specific result.
Hmm.
Anybody disagree with that one?
Huh?
So far, right now, the scientific method and how a mage proceeds, we're all in line still.
Mhm.
Prediction, we're still in line because you're making a prediction of what your process is going to do.
Mhm.
Testing, now we're going to deviate a little. Not too much, I don't think personally. You guys can disagree. But this is where you're literally putting together what you're going to do, how you're going to experiment. What is your plan of attack?
Mhm.
Actually, I have a good example for all this.
Go right ahead.
So, a little while ago, while I was in school, a friend and I decided to conduct our own experiments. A few of them actually before I met you on this channel. But the running hypothesis we were trying to run, or the question we had in mind, was more of just how much could doing a spell or changing the method of it, would we be able to alter a probability? And so we tested this with simple coin flips to start. And so we did a bunch. That was the idea that we were going to try to do was 70 to 80% getting it to land exactly the way we wanted to. So whether it was heads or tails, and just controlling the number of which it landed one more than the other. Ideally, if we can get it to where it always landed one way, that would basically be the ultimate result for that particular test.
Okay.
So our experiment that we went down was we did a series of, I think it was 50 or 100, or I forget the number. It's been so long. But we did lots of just control group tests, just multiple sets of 50 each, recording how many times it landed one way versus another, blanketly, no spell, no nothing affecting it, just how it would go. Then we would take the coin and we would try to do a spell or enchant it or do something to affect how it would change, and then do the exact number of tests, same number of sets, see if that changed at all. Ratio for the first set, it wasn't conclusive. It landed about the same. So I couldn't tell if anything was affected, because if there was a change, it was so minute it didn't matter. Okay, changed up the method, try again. So we did it a different way. Same number of repetitions, same number of sets. Okay, now we definitely have a little bit more favoring, but we don't know if this is a fluke or a thing. So we did the exact same method again, same number of sets, same number of repetitions, same benefit. It was small, it was only like 10%, but it was still repeatable. And we did this another 5 times with that same method and it stayed. Okay, let's change again. Completely different method now. Did the same number of tests. Now we're up to about 60, 65%, somewhere in there, I think. Okay, is it a fluke or not? Several more of the same enchantment on that one, again and again and again for like a week. That one stayed relatively consistent. And I think that's 65. I think another method we got as far as almost between 60 and 70 is about where it stayed. We couldn't quite figure out a way to get past that. But it was consistent that it landed more one way that we wanted it to land than what we didn't.
That's pretty cool.
Now,
That is cool. And honestly, I think what Born's describing is why a lot of people who study magic don't use this method. is because it is tedious. It takes
That was
keeping. It takes
that was a few months of
eyes
testing.
on details. It takes
Yeah.
repetition over and over, maybe seeing no results. But that's how you collect the actual data.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if that entire time, and we would have kept going too, if we went through everything we could possibly think of and it didn't give us anything, then it highly suggests, it doesn't prove, but it highly suggests that our hypothesis is wrong and we can't affect that kind of probability. Now, it doesn't prove it because there's really not a way to until someone does prove it does in one way or another. But because it does, and we did see a positive result, it highly suggests that this is functional.
How old are you when you did this?
It was only a few years ago. I was probably
Oh, okay.
18, 19 maybe.
Okay. No, that's pretty good, I think, scientific wording, personally, Drew.
Mhm.
Born, sorry. Like, I do this thing where I swap
That's
names in
fair,
my
I
brain,
don't.
forgive me.
Okay.
It's not, I know he's born, it's just my brain does a stupid thing. But no, I think that was pretty solid, I would say. I think that's a good example.
Yeah, and it wasn't just me either. The person I was
Yeah.
doing was doing his own
Yeah.
set completely separate
Yeah.
from me, and got the same results each time we did a specific method.
No, that is good. And I
So
have
it wasn't
a lot
just
of
me.
people-
We were two different people doing two separate things and compared and it lined up.
And it
Or
is
if you have-
tedious, but for me, it's important because this is literally how I overcame my skepticism and doubt that Magick was just hooey.
Okay.
Have you heard of Alison Tchaikovsky, Ethan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, have you heard the story of where she like prolonged the coming of rain because she was mowing her lawn using the Stele of Jude? Like that's immediately what came to mind. Like she constantly uses the Stele of Jude to like fix or like especially like I think her fridge broke. She fixed the fridge that way. She like fixed a car. She keeps like, and she does this thing where she asks like the people she knows, I guess she has like a coven or something, or maybe that's the wrong word. Like people she knows to do the Stele of Jude, and then they like, I fixed my radio, I fixed this with that, and I'm like, that's also things like that where I was like, oh, they have physical effects, and that's cool.
Oh.
Huh?
That would be. I mean, hell, it's like, speaking of delaying things for as long as possible. Normally, delivery that appeared at my door was originally going to arrive within 10 minutes of us starting the recording, and I did something to try and push it off. Didn't last as long as I wanted it to, but
Yeah.
I mean, you can.
We're running over, but unless somebody's supposed to go, I'm wanting to get to the end of this because this is a good. This is a good one, and I never promised all roundtable videos will be an hour.
That's true.
So, yeah, testing it's a big one, and I mean, the Greek magical papyri is a good example. I mean, for me, I have to say one of my bigger oops was with the clip-on.
Oops.
Yeah, it's oops. That was a 2-year oops
Yeah.
of stupidity. But
Yeah.
this is one where I would say my thought process in setting up my testing bit me in the rear because my thought process was to try and gather data. Mind you, I pathworked the tree of life, but at this point in time, I really didn't know bupkis about the cliff off. And my curiosity got the best of me. I'm out on a trip. I'm spending most of the day in a hotel before I have to do meetings and see people and talk to people. It gets boring. So I decided I'm going to do some reading. I'm reading on different spheres of the cliff off. And me being me, it's like I'm going to stick my head in, get an idea of what it is, take some notes so that when I get ready to do my experiments, I'm good to go. No one ever told me once you open that door, it don't close until that energy makes whatever change or effect it has. And I literally had 7 days, and each day I did a different sphere back to back. So I had 7 spheres wide open. And honestly, I didn't realize I left the doors open because I didn't know they couldn't close. I'm used to, you end the ritual, you end the working, and that's it, that you end it. And for the next 2 years, those spheres did what those spheres do to make change, create, bring wisdom, bring knowledge and power while throwing you through a meat grinder. And it took me a long time to identify why my life went into a blender. But once I realized it and I was able to assist in the forward momentum, it cleared up quicker. Don't ever do that, by the way. If you study the cliff off, don't do what I did. That was a bad idea. But I was just preparing for my testing at that point. I just made it stupid along the way. And here's a question for you all. When it does come to your testing in Magic, this is the hard one, because making your prediction, what you want to happen, that's easy. But
Yeah.
I've always struggled to try and communicate the testing procedure because, I mean, you all know I pushed the journal. Like people's probably sick of hearing me talk about keeping a journal.
Oh yeah, I went through a few notebooks with the
To
coin
this
flip.
day, I find the best way to really do your testing is to record everything in that journal and be as specific as you can without overly limiting, and have genuine expectations. That way you have data points that you can plot and track. This gets difficult, I know, but what would the three of you recommend to someone who's wanting to do this? How would you recommend they go about it? Oscar, we'll
I
start.
volunteer. Dang. I was gonna volunteer heathen.
He
Damn,
tried.
all right.
Heathen net.
Luckily I have an answer. Luckily I have an answer. You literally called me and said, all right. I think first is to withhold the emotional expectation of it. Try to because I remember there was a magician who I have to remember his name. He deserves kind of reference. Taylor Elwood, I think is his name. He always talks about the worst time to do magic is when you really need it to work, because you're not going to be able to let go of the result.
Yeah.
So he's like, if you need a job, you're already messed up, because now you're going to be like, oh God, I need a job, blah, blah, blah. And you have to do the magic to get it in there. It's not when you want to do that. And I think that's an important thing too, is to withhold the wanting and just allow it to happen. And I know that's extremely difficult depending on the emotional connection you have to that result. But one quick example I could give is that I did cedar work to stop my neighbors who were upstairs from stomping after a certain hour. And I connected it to the where the sun is in the sky. So after sunset, night. And the first day I was just like, oh, it's awfully quiet. Second day I was like, oh, it's kind of quiet. It's the seventh day and I don't hear from them after the sunset. So I'm like, success? So,
Yeah.
but I don't think I could ever 100% say, unless I was stalking them, that they were low energy at night. You know what I mean? So I'm that's good enough for me. And I think that's another thing too, is what is the satisfactory condition for your result?
That is exactly, yeah. Because even during the coin flip experiments, I mean, we were looking for about a 70-80% margin and to really call our experiment successful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and there is a very good chance that either one of us, our desire for it to work, not to work, oh, I think this method is garbage, any of that could have skewed the result just based on that, even if the method itself would have worked just fine.
Yeah.
And so a lot of, any of that can factor. So it always has to be kept in mind.
Heathen. Oscar voted you.
Thanks, buddy. So if anybody doing experimentation, realize be gentle with yourself. Realize that we don't have a laboratory. there is no scenario where we can sterilize a room, magically speaking, to do the work we do. You know, just by the stuff we know about is there's planetary locations, there's phases of the moon, there's phases of the equinox, there's spirits that you're dealing with. All these things matter. And if I would try something no fewer than 3 times on 3 complete separate times, because the things I mentioned are just the things that we know about because they've been written about since time immemorial. Who's to say there's not another thing that nobody ever caught on to that can help or hinder the magic from working? So in order to really get a strong idea of whether something will or will not work, I would say try it no fewer than 3 times. If you get a blowout the first time, that's fine. Wait a week or 2, try it again, different circumstance, different timing, time it the best way you know how with what you have. Because, you know, bad magic is better than no magic sometimes. I mean, when I say bad, I don't mean bad as in, you know, you're not. I'm saying like, oh, I don't know if the moon's in the right order. I don't know if it's the right day of the week. I don't know if it's the right time.
Yeah,
Just do
yeah.
it.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.
Because I am like, I can't tell you, Drake. I can't tell you how many times in my very early days that I was a hardcore armchair magician because I was always waiting for no, I don't have the perfect thing. I don't have the right time. I don't have the right wand.
I actually
Blah,
have
blah,
an
blah,
interesting question, and this actually comes from applied practice for me and many other students and magicians I know.
Mhm.
What would you say to someone if they found out that applying the moon, applying the equinoxes, applying astrology and these things actually killed the results as opposed to helping it? Like if they just threw it out and didn't think about it, they got better results.
My honest opinion, without knowing any other facts about the thing that you just submitted, is I would say that they were too in their own heads and their conscious mind was killing their subconscious connection to the divine. So they were not able to send it out. That would be my immediate guess. They're pumping their own brakes because they're too in their own heads about it. That would be my first guess, because I would have to look at their chart, because it's possible that whatever planets they were working with could also be in detriment to them.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things it could be, but just based on just that and nothing else, I would say they may have had their heads too into it, where they're not really letting go of it because they're trying to control everything, and because they can't let go of it, they can't allow the magic release to do its work. That would be my guess.
Okay. Because that's interesting, because I'm actually one of them. That's the reason I said it's from application. Like I have spent a lot of time tinkering with planetary magics and working with planetary spirits, but it's the weirdest thing because anytime I try to get the ritual right to where I'm doing it the right time of day, whether it's a planetary hour, planetary days, you know, the planetary cycles, I get bupkis. I really do. On the other hand, if it's like, okay, I got this working to do, I got the spell to do, and I just jump in there and I do the working, I get amazing results. And I mean, if any of you's watched me try to answer planetary questions on the channel, I try to be very respectful of it because I've seen magicians get amazing results. But at the same time, I can't make that same claim for me because I get bupkis, which confuses people because on the step out into any other area, I start getting great results.
Because a lot of it was the same. Most here or most of the audience probably won't end up probably getting this, but it's the same thing as you walking me through walking during soul travel. I was just over analyzing how my leg has to move this way and then place and then step and then transition my weight and then lift, move forward, place and step. And the micromanaging just ended up walking.
Yeah, and I actually
going nowhere.
Wonder if he's just partially right, because could the trying to get the timing all right distract me from the more core necessities?
I think it's what Heathen said, honestly. I think that like ceremonial magic speaks to Heathen in a way that doesn't speak to you.
Yeah.
And so it's because to me, that was my issue with ceremonial magic, was like just kind of like the Christian phrasing. I don't have a problem with Christianity, but it's kind of like the devotional thing is not definitely my thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, or you have people who take that to like unnecessary degree, like Luchoweski, I think is his name. He is like, you got to go get a branch from South Carolina exactly like this, and then do it exactly like that, or God will hate you. And it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa.
So, and just to be clear, I'm not knocking planetary magic. Again, I've
No,
seen
no, me neither.
amazing
Oh no,
things,
I've had some really great results because I was using a
but
lot of
I think
that
it's a
before I
good thing to
really-
bring up because I've seen a lot of people come to magic and they try this thing that people's like, oh, I got these great results, and they're like, it ain't working for me.
Mhm.
I must be broken.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that you're broken. If I were to, gosh,
I'm
you know,
not saying
it's
I'm
hard to
broken.
say.
It's just I've seen a lot of people. They've actually emailed me saying I'm broken. I can't do magic because um I got
Gotcha.
issues, but that ain't it.
Gotcha. I mean, yeah, I mean, really and truly, that's kind of the only, that's really the only thing I could really consider, because I know, because I have a lot of successful planetary stuff. Like planetary magic is my jam. Like I love planetary magic. Like I get a lot of, it's not just that I get a lot of results from it. It's also that I find it very, I actually am drawn, funnily enough, Oscar, I think Oscar stepped out, but I am actually drawn to the devotional aspect of it.
Right.
I really like the, maybe not in a worship perspective like a lot of people in a Western country might consider worship, but it's very much a reverence for me. I'm very much in awe of, you know, these powers that they are,
Yeah.
and I find it to be a privilege to be able to work with them. And I'm happy that I have the brain power to understand, and the capacity to work with these intelligences, you know, and the interest, you know,
Yeah,
because
and I get that, and I think that could be it, because when we talk about our paths, I mean, people, it's almost maddening how people like, I got to find a path before I can do magic.
No.
No, and I think
really don't.
you really don't. Get in there, try some different things, because I do think different styles or traditions connect with people. And I think the better you connect with it, the better your results are going to be.
Yeah.
It's not about which one's better, which one's worse. It's not a pissing contest of any kind.
no, not at all.
Although I do feel magicians sometimes tend to turn it into one.
So
Anytime that there's a personal preference involved with anything, there's usually someone who's willing to argue more than debate.
Oh yeah, like if someone comes to me with planetary magic, I'm like, here, let me introduce you to this guy, because it's like I can answer your questions, but it's only on an academic level, because I've not really had good results with it personally, but I've also I know people very, very closely that I can't deny their results.
Yeah.
Well, Drake, I've spent thousands of dollars to do what you can do with $20 worth of material, so I need this smug sense of superiority to survive. Okay.
Hey man, hey, you're
True.
dressing smart. You got it going. Don't worry.
It's all I got left.
Actually, I was the one joking about everybody dressing up, and then here I show up in a t-shirt and vest, like, all right, let's go. I missed a chance to wear my dress coat. I love that laugh. Okay. So yes, when we are doing our testing, you know, be open, be kind with yourself. But you also have to be honest, and Oscar's right. Remove yourself from the emotions. Desperation is a bad place to do magic, because you can't release the energy. People, I did a whole video on the importance of being able to let it go. They wrote a song about it. There's a reason. I think we all hate that song, especially if you have little ones around. But they wrote a song. I did a video. I think the video is better. But that brings us to the final one. And this is the part, I think this is where everyone trips, falls, and really has the hardest time. And that's an analysis. Because this, in a lot of ways, suffers from the same problem shadow work does. You got to look in the mirror and be painfully honest with the data you're examining.
Like you cannot let your personal bias skew anything. Similar to doing the experiments. You can't have your emotions play into it at all. You know, if I were to go do the coin experiment again and it comes up with absolute bubkiss, I got to be honest with myself and say, well, what we did turned up bubkiss.
Yeah.
Is it possible someone else might do the same experiments and gets results? It's possible, but we got nothing. Now, luckily we didn't, but still, it's like
Yeah.
if someone else were to do the experiment and come up with nothing, it doesn't change the results we got. But at the same time, maybe it just doesn't work for them. It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, being honest with the facts that you do have is important.
Yeah. I mean, whether it's scrying or soul travel or remote viewing, when I'm working with a student, one of the biggest things, like and this is why a lot of people don't like me as a teacher. I don't go in with the faith or trust, you know, tell me what you see. All right, good job. And I don't go in with the describe something to me and see how we can make this description fit something. Like I literally will set up a very specific place for them to scry into or to go to and to look at. I will design a sigil to get them there. I will photograph the area, and then I will go, all right, tell me what you see.
Yeah.
And it's a simple, either you seen it or you didn't.
Yeah. I'm
a little rough like that. Some of you have found.
Yeah.
But is that the only way to do it? I'd say no. It is my method. It's not right or wrong. It's my method. I'm not everyone's cup of tea or coffee. But that brings us to an interesting question with this. And we have an interesting group here for this question. How important is that hard facts, like what I'm describing here with scrying, when you have an opportunity to do it, compared to just the spiritual development or belief without that hard data? Where do you stand on that personally?
Ooh.
I think it
mean,
depends.
For me personally, I mean, belief is great, but I'm the type of person where belief doesn't mean anything unless I have something to ground it on. So if it comes to, and this kind of goes back to the polarizing subject, like where am I on the scale of, does it need to be 100% purely empirical, or, just whatever wishy-washy whim comes to mind, or a genuine belief, or whatever system I want to subscribe to, regardless of basis? I would probably end up putting myself more about here. I got to have a lot more of the fact to lean on, reason, and something I can repeatedly do, even if I can't prove it. As long as I can repeat the result, that's enough for me. And I can kind of work on the spiritual end of it from there.
Okay. That's a fair answer. I like that. Heathen?
So I will, I guess I'll be the fly in the ointment on this one. So
Okay.
I am a firm believer that it doesn't actually matter on the grand scale, because you're also like, so as magicians, one of the gifts that we get from a magical thinking is we get to think outside of this lifespan. And most people don't. And I don't think people realize how beautiful of a gift that actually is. The fact that you can look as your soul cycle, you're going to come back again and again and again. This is not the only chance you get. And when you look at it from a large perspective, I think that on the short term, on the small scale, I think it's very important because, I mean, like, I'm not gonna pretend like I don't use magic to get tchotchkes too. I like stuff. Stuff's cool, but
Right.
stuff goes great when I put it next to my other stuff. It's amazing. But but long term, from a soul development point of view, lest we forget, gentlemen, that the whole point of this is to become more divine. And it may not be this cycle that it happens. It may be 100 years or 100 life cycles rather that it takes for this to happen. But shit, what else are we doing with our time? You know, what else you got to do? You know, like, so for me, I think that the method is the method is the way, like the means is the way. So when it comes down to how much do you need, I mean, the fact that we're all here talking about this right now, you've been called to this. You don't, because you don't get to choose what you're interested in. You know what you're interested in picks you, you know. And if
Right.
anybody doesn't believe me, try to be interested in something that you don't like and then tell me how that works out for you.
Trust me, if I could have chosen, I'd be rich right
Precisely, right. And
now. I would
that's
be rich.
but that's the thing, that this is something that actually interests us, which means it's something that we were meant to do. And if you're meant to do it, you can't get away from it. You can't, you know. And I think that the act of doing it is more important from a large, grand scale, grand picture. I think the act of doing it and the act of growing as an entity is more important than any amount of evidence or lack thereof in there. But now on the short term, on the small scale, yeah, it's important because you know, obviously you want your stuff to work on a smaller scale. You want your stuff to work, and you have to have a metric, because the closer you get to 50-50, the further away from any actual accomplishments you're going to have. So, you know, on the short scale, yeah, it matters a lot. You need to have the ability to look at it in a scientific manner. Belief is only useful in so much as you have to be willing to. It will hinder you if you don't believe it's going to work. It won't stop it, but it will hinder it. That's been my experience.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true.
If you, because I have absolutely done work that I was like, there's no freaking way, and then it happened, and I was like, oh shit, all right, cool.
Yeah.
But you know, it takes longer. It's a bumpier road, and it's, in my experience, always anyway. So that's kind of my million miles up, and then my close to earth answer, I
No, that's
guess.
a fair answer. That's a real fair answer. Oscar.
Yeah, you've had your chance to hide. Your turn.
I I think it depends, because I think, like, kind of agree somewhat with what Ethan was saying, that like kind of just like, what do you want to do, right? And I think that, like, you know, if you ask a Buddhist, they're gonna have a different answer. Or if you ask a Wall Street trader, you get a different answer, right?
Yep.
And I think that, like, me personally, from my studies, like, Freya is my teacher, and I would be remiss to not say what, like, sometimes she says is like, my things are like an outlet of my experiences. Like, I get these things because they remind me of, like, stuff, right? And I think, like, to me, that's kind of how I approach it too. Is like everybody likes stuff, but I want, like, the stuff to be worth the stuff, like the effort that I put into it.
Mhm.
And I guess that's kind of like how I view it.
No, that's fair. Which interesting. I mean, yeah, Freya views her things much the same way I view my tattoos.
Yeah.
Every tattoo I have, there's a meaning, a story. It's a living journal, really. But I would actually agree with you all, because Heathen, you are right. You're talking about that soul cycle, those life cycles. A lot of people use the word ascension these days, getting closer to divine, becoming a divine being. And you know, we phrase it many, many ways, obviously, and everyone has theories on exactly how that process works, which that would make an entirely great roundtable of its own.
Yeah.
That's one.
But you are right. I would say, for me, I think the confirming on the small scale, like the shrines and the ability to manifest a lifestyle that you want, or lifestyle that you need, whatever, however you want to phrase that, is important, especially early on, which Heathen did touch on, because this is going to show you the validity of the work you're putting in on the small scale. It absolutely is. Because if you don't have that tangible validity, that for whatever reason, the human mind needs this tangible thing
Yeah, grab things.
before it can move over into soul travel, traveling the planes, learning and growing to that event that is summarized as ascension. Then it becomes far, far harder to not doubt the self, to not think you're just crazy, you're not making it up.
Sometimes we still wonder.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that never
Yes.
I
goes
don't
away.
know a mage that has not at least once in their life woke up and think, am I bloody mad?
Uh-huh.
Um,
Where's the straight jacket?
Rick and I talked about that this week. I had a whole conversation with him. I was just like, I think I'm going crazy.
So, and I do think it's a balance. And I know most people's heard me say I'm a faithless bastard. And I am. I don't have faith in the definition of faith that I was taught, which is you believe in the thing regardless. I can't do that. Can't do it. It's not something that is within me to do. But I also came to Magic to prove it didn't work because I had a bad experience in multiple religions. But I couldn't deny that I would do this thing would happen. I'd do this thing, it would happen again. That is showing a clear cause and effect. That's
like,
showing me that something's working.
Damn it, I'm trying to
And
disprove you. Stop it.
I just kept going forward. That's weirdly why scrying became my favorite divination.
Yeah.
It was one of the ones that was the most tangible to prove potential and also show the human fallacy at the same time. And I found myself, the more I understood that what I was doing was actually real and actually working, I was growing quicker, almost exponentially quicker. And there's just some events in life, like Heathen mentions calling. That scares the shit out of me. It really, I know it's weird, but it does, because I look in the mirror, I see a crazy redneck. And for those of you who know me in my private life, Born and Oscar especially, you've heard stories of my youth. I don't make good decisions.
We wouldn't tend to disagree per se.
I mean, the Skylight story alone, bad idea.
Yes.
That one
I know about that
especially.
story.
That one especially. It's one of my favorites.
But when you put the word calling in there and you say, you know, I was meant to walk my path, which is dragon magic and all this stuff, that's a terrifying thought for me. Because now you're putting me up on some kind of a pedestal like, hey, you're going to make a difference here. And
but why?
I'm like, are you sure you got the right country boy?
Why couldn't it be Joe from 2 Doors Down?
But at the same time, I've had plenty of people point to my work, my courses, how much it's changed people's life. And it's a little creepy. It is.
Because there's all of that, and hell, at a bare minimum, even if it doesn't change a person's life or their style of doing things, it's a point to rally around.
Yeah. And I didn't even know dragon magic was a thing until that individual who apparently don't show up on security cameras approached me at work.
Yeah.
Which I've talked about that in the live stream, so I won't rehash it. And I think this is part of where magicians get lost. They think they either have to take the empirical data stance or they have to take the faith stance. And I could be wrong. I think there's a validity to blending the two together. I really do.
That's, yeah, I would tend to agree, because much like the discussion earlier, especially with Heathen you made an excellent point when it came to polarity on things. You know, it's the philosophical, it's not, you know, black and white. It's not you are fully 100% this and 0% of that, or vice versa. It's always, where am I on this scale between, not just in this area, but also this scale, this scale, this scale, this scale. There's potentially an inconceivable number of different blends. But in this one in particular, I mean, people can fall anywhere on it. Anywhere in between.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
And I mean, maybe I oversimplify it on the channel. but I try to communicate it in, if what you're doing, if your path you're walking is achieving the goals you're seeking to achieve and is working for you, then anything I or anyone else says doesn't matter. And that could be an oversimplification. And I know some mages who don't like me saying that because they say I'm doing a discredit to the great work. Because there's some people who all they'll ever want is money. And they'll never progress past that.
Mhm.
But I always have two thoughts on that, even because, first off, in my experience, regardless of what you start on, I've noticed that as you progress, as you're starting to rack in the money, you slowly gravitate over to the other side, the bigger picture, naturally.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I think in and of itself, the great work is going to show itself to a practitioner.
Hmm.
The second thought is, great work or not, who is any magician to tell another how to live their life?
Mhm. That's true as well.
Well, beyond
It's-
that, talking about the great work, I mean, anybody, anyone who has people that rely on them for basic necessities, food, shelter, or if you're in a position at work where you're, in a position of authority over another person in any way, shape, or form, it's real hard to do the great work when you're trying to feed somebody. When you're trying to bring in enough money to put food on the table, screw the great work. I got people that depend on me and I don't know how I'm going to feed them tomorrow.
They
Yeah.
can make it more.
Yeah. So anybody who eschews the tchotchkes and stuff and says, "Oh, you don't need all that. You just need to focus on the great work." They're either in a position of very superb privilege to where they've never had to think of that before,
Yes.
or they're very, very young and or very, very immature and have never had a position where they were responsible for anything that wasn't themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah. 100%.
That's true.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
being said, on the other hand, the people that get into it being like, I'm gonna make my millions, and I'm just gonna use this as a tool. Again, the method is the way. The magic is a way of changing you, right? You don't get to get on the bus and not you go where the bus goes. You don't get, that's not an option you get to opt out of. When you start doing this stuff and you start making these life changes, it changes you. It's the form of alchemy, right? Spiritual
does.
alchemy.
Mhm.
The changes change you too. And even with Born, what I was going to talk about, even with you doing your experimentation, as dry as it was, you were.
It
I don't
was.
even know if you know, and you very well may. I don't know how you may be far more advanced than I am. I'm not trying to speak to you from a mountain because that's never my
I
goal.
mean, who's to say we've never compared? So,
Right.
We're all at the same bar, people.
Yeah.
We'll
Right.
get
But
beers here
the
in a
idea
minute.
there is, even though like it can be kind of boring, you're refining yourself in that crucible every time you're doing
Absolutely.
it. Because
Well,
doing
yeah.
that work increases your power as you're doing it, even though it's a simple thing. And just doing the act of doing it over and over and over again
Mhm.
increases your willpower, but it also increases your ability to do it more often. And it
Mhm.
changes, and it will change you. And I've gotten to the point now where you can almost, not every time, but a lot of times I can tell a lot of times if somebody's a little let's say special. Like they do the stuff, because you look at them and then you kind of do that
Yeah.
quick double take. Like, wait a minute. You can kind of pick up on on what they're putting down.
Now, see,
Yeah.
that's interesting that you mentioned that, because the person I did those same experience with, we went to the same school
Mm-hmm.
that I was mentioning, but we did not know each other before that. It was kind of one of those pass in the hall, and I remember distinctively both of us doing a quick double take and then leaving each other alone, and then eventually doing it again, passing in the hall later. It's like, why is that the same guy? What is happening? And then we finally went and talked about it, and it's like,
Yep.
casual conversation, and then eventually it got over to that end of things. I'm like, oh, that's what it is.
Yeah, my working theory with that is, and again, this is just a pet theory. This can be I'm not dying on this hill. If somebody like debunks it, then consider it debunked. But my pet theory with this is that as you continue working and getting more powerful, your aura expands, and your presence expands. You know, whatever word you want to use, your magical presence expands. And I think when you pass somebody that is also doing that, I think they bump into each other and you notice. That's my working pet
Yeah.
theory.
I would, because
Honestly,
essentially
my
it's
research that fits from everything.
Yeah,
I've
same.
researched, you know.
it's
Same
the same
conclusion.
thing, honestly, as being able to notice that, wow, that person has really worked out compared to someone who's never touched a weight in their life, just
Right.
for
Yeah.
layman's terms for our audience here. So it'd be the same thing as like, wow, I've gone to the gym for a while now. You know, I've worked on myself, I've worked on this and that, and these particular exercises, and I just happen to walk across someone in public who is like, oh, you got skinny person, you got fat, you got, you know, weird gangly shape that's probably got scoli or polio or something. You know, who knows? And then not polio, you got the wrong word, but
Hey Drake, you weren't going to monetize this, right?
but then you come across someone who, like, you can tell they've gone through and they've done that work as well, and you can tell even in some cases maybe where they focused more than others,
Oh
as
yeah.
opposed to, you know,
Oh yeah.
Hilbert, who's barely able to keep himself standing over here. You know, it's just that kind of just, oh, I notice you've done this more than
that's a
everyone
good way to
else
put that.
to a
It
significant
is.
degree.
It is. That's a good way to put that. All right,
Because-
guys. We're really pushing this one, so I'm going to go ahead and get you guys to do your closing thoughts.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we could be here for 6 hours yammering.
Probably.
We probably could.
In fact,
Probably
at
could.
some point, we may have to get together off recording, just hang out and shoot shit and see how weird it gets, because this has been
Okay.
fascinating. Like, I've actually literally forgot the camera was here. Like, until the whole scoliosis thing, I forgot we're recording. So I dread having to go back and, like, do I actually have to edit this? I hope not. Because this is a lot.
Let me know if you do. I'll feel bad, but it's better to be informed.
Oh, I'm sure you'll feel bad. I may make you do it. But if you can, give us your closing thoughts, because I know we were all over the map. We tried. The first half was very much on the science. The second half, we went more into the philosophy. But considering the nature of this topic, I think that's fair. It is very fair.
Yeah.
But your closing thoughts on science and magic, science versus magic, because I don't really know which way I'm going to title this, and your advice to new and old practitioners looking into this topic. Okay. Oscar, you volunteering to go first?
Yeah.
Or are you getting ready to throw someone else under the bus?
Just like, good.
I think
I'm
David
not.
had something to say.
So
Okay, he's actually volunteering to go first. So here we go. Oscar, the floor is yours.
I guess I volunteer myself because I think I have the youngest practice. I don't know how long you've been practicing, Ethan, but I've been doing this for about a year and some change. And so I remember, like, the first time it was extremely uncomfortable. It's like, you know, when you get up from the couch and you try to touch your toes and that pain, I think it's very much like that. And I find that going to the gym and magic are almost identical.
They
You
actually
need a
are.
goal, you need a structure, and you need to go every day. And then at first you're not going to see anything, and you're going to question why you even did this. But then eventually it gets to a point where you're like, holy crap, this is real. I can do a pull-up, you know?
And then also, if you slack off for a while, like, you don't lose everything.
You lose your
Like,
gains.
you got to work back up to some of it.
Yeah. And to hit, I think that's one thing, right? But let's say you get into the rhythm of that and, like, where you have some lofty goal. Well, I think when you get to that point, I would recommend thinking like Columbo. There's something that Drake and I were talking about, is like trying to be like an investigator and just ask as many questions.
Actually calls me Columbo.
And it just, to me, I just like, be like Columbo. Just ask all the questions you can to anybody, anywhere. And then if they get annoying, you know, and they walk away, wait for the next guy. And then just keep doing it. And eventually you'll come up with something.
Pretty good idea, though. Yeah. All right, Mister. I'm going to feel bad if it's 2 hours of editing.
Well, hopefully, it
I
won't
wear
be
the hat, so I'm throwing you
whole
under the
thing.
bus next.
Like, hopefully, it won't be the whole thing you gotta edit.
The only way to find if I missed something is to go through the whole thing.
Well, no, I'm just talking about having to tweak every.
Well, I won't have to tweak it all, thankfully.
He's gonna put it up, and it's just gonna be boring being like, I hate Drake and even.
Jeez.
Your closing thoughts.
Huh. That one's gonna be because we covered a lot of topics.
Oh yeah, this has been loaded. Jade missed another loaded one.
It's like I don't want to just rehash what's already been said, but at the same time, what else really is there? Because I mean, just being honest with the entire process, with yourself and with what you're doing, honestly, is both the hardest thing to do for some folks, and it's also the most important. Making sure that, similar to the gym analogy, keep to it. Do it as often as you need to do it in the way you're supposed to be doing it. Slacking off has its consequences. Ignoring one facet or another, or how heavy the weight is, and it's like, I can handle it. There's reasons why Drake's one of the catchphrases we run into often is, I came, I saw, I got blowed up.
Yeah.
I'm sure this won't be heavy. Hits the floor. But just and don't take all of it from one perspective either. Don't look at because it was brought up briefly, you don't have to find a path before you can practice. Look around. Don't take one person's word or advice. Talk to Drake, myself, go find a friend, a book, a video, test around, see what works, doesn't work. There was a news anchor at one point that you've mentioned before, Drake. And kind of the method I would think should be similar to that. It's like, we're giving you the facts. You decide what your conclusion is you're coming up to and how it works, how you want it to work, or why.
Yeah.
And just proceed.
Very true. Very true. And if you are interested in chatting with me or Born or Oscar, and actually, hey, we're all in the Gilded community. You can find the link at the About section of the YouTube channel. Join that. We're usually there, and we're usually available to answer questions of some level. Technically, Heathen's just a member, so he's not required to answer questions. The rest of us were roped into admin positions, but
most of us like to hear the sound of our own voice. So if you're counting on us to talk, we'll be there.
Lauren loves to hear himself talk. So get him started, and you just got background noise the rest of the day. All right. Heathen, man, it is your turn, and I can't thank you enough for volunteering to come on here and join this madness. And you honestly, you added a lot. Thank you very much. Your closing thoughts, mate.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really thoroughly enjoyed this. So I guess my closing thoughts, statistically speaking, based on YouTube algorithms and stuff, there's going to be at least a few people that are watching this that are what I lovingly refer to as looky-loos, they want to know everything about everything without ever picking up a book or actually doing it. So I guess my closing thoughts would be to them. And I say this with love, but not fussing at you. Be courageous. Pick up a book. It doesn't matter what book. Be courageous. You're not going to die. You're not going to, nothing's going to drag you off down the alleyway. Be courageous. Do something. Man, I had this whole soliloquy just planned out. I just jumped.
All right.
We can't take him nowhere.
That's what Born does. That's just what Born does. Sorry.
No, be courageous. Try it. I mean, if you've spent, good God, how long we've been going? An hour and a half. If you spend an hour and a half listening to us and you've got this much curiosity in it, look into it. Look into it. Do something. Do something with it. We've got life was meant to be lived. Suck the marrow out of life. Do something.
Mhm.
For those who are listening that are maybe in the intermediate stages, because I by no means consider myself advanced. I consider myself like early intermediate, if nothing else.
Mhm.
And I would say to those, humility, keep your humility, because there's a lot of arrogance that you see thrown around in the work we do and with a lot of people. We don't know it all. I'm learning new stuff every day, and new people will come in, and I don't know, be curious, be humble, and be courageous. And I think you won't go wrong.
Well said. Well said. Because
Very well said.
I tell people in life, don't be afraid to get out and live it. It's not about success. It's not about failure. It's about getting out there and trying things. Have I done things to embarrass the living shit out of myself? Absolutely. Have I done things that have been successful? Absolutely. Have I done things that have failed spectacularly? Yes. But I can say I tried them. I got out there. I have a lot of experiences in my life, and you may even call them adventures, whatever you would. But I can look back and it has been a blast. And I apply that same mentality to Magic. It's, I want to try the things. Do I sometimes make mistakes? Yes, I've admitted it. But that's not going to stop me from continuing to try the things. And I think honestly, as a magician, if anything has brought me along, it's my willingness to just try. I mean, I do have a thirst for knowledge. That's true. But I am a big believer in application, not just reading the book, but to apply it and to try it and to see for yourself. I think that is a great point. And yes, to the others who's been doing this a while, ego, arrogance, it's a danger. That's why, people's like, Drake, why are you so hard on yourself? You call yourself just a silly redneck or whatnot. It's like, I'll be honest, I don't want to lose that view of myself.
Mhm.
I really don't. I don't want to be on a pedestal. I don't want to be looked up to, really. I want to be just another one of the guys. That's all I want to be.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's all I ever want to be. And that's all I really want to be viewed at, because I've known arrogant people and I never want to be that.
Mhm.
So that's, if anyone ever wonders why I make jokes about myself or put myself the way I do, it's not that I look down at me. It's just kind of self-checking, if you will, because that's who I want to be. I just want to be that normal guy, if that makes any sense. And be kind to each other, try to help each other. Sometimes all they need is an ear. Sometimes they just need to explain their thought process and theory. They don't need you to back it up or anything. They just need you to listen so they can talk it out. Half the time I find if they just talk it out to someone else, they find the missing pieces before they finish what they're saying. So yeah. Everyone, this has been fun.
Mhm.
It is.
Heathen, I think it's safe to say we should have you back sometime.
Oh,
Um,
yay.
I completely agree.
Agreed.
It's been a blast.
Thank you.
so it's actually good to have someone that can keep up with Oscar over here when it gets into some of those areas over there, because I
feel
do a
like-
good job. I think most days I do a good job, but I do think I'm out of the pool a little longer than I should have been to do a good job of keeping up with him sometimes. There is a part of me that wants to lock him and Squirrel in a room and just let them argue science and see who comes out. We could probably sell tickets to it, but
Then she'll try to bring up that horses are gods now, and then it'll just get weird.
yeah.
What?
But hopefully in this madness, we have piqued your all's interest into the two topics, shown you the difference, shown you the similarities, and it will help your practice. And as always, everyone, keep on trying, keep on progressing, just every day try to do a little better than you did yesterday, and you will be surprised where you will be in a year's time. All right. All right. Everyone, good night. Take it easy. Bye-bye.